Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Refuge. My name is Eric, if you haven't been here before, and today we're actually talking about a new book. Not The Husky and His White Cat Season. It has actually occurred to me, actually a couple months ago, that while I have been talking a lot about, been giving summaries about The Husky and His White Cat Season, I rated that one for someone who was not a beginner. And so I recently come to the realization that while that is not for a beginner, I never actually said a book in contrast to what I would give a beginner. So I've decided to give a spoiler-free review for something like that. This is the Scum villain's self-saving system. If you don't want any spoilers, if you don't want to know what actually happens in the book, if you've just seen this in Barnes & Noble and you want to know what this is about, this is the right video for that. So anyway, I'm going to start with the basics. What is this? If you've never seen this before, never heard of this genre. So this is the Scum Villain Self-Saving System. It's an English translated novel from the same publisher as The Husky and His White Cat Season, 7Seas Entertainment. This particular series was written by MXTX. That is more her name among us fans. MXTX is probably the most well-known author in the Danmei genre. Most people, I think, have gotten into this genre from one of her works. She's responsible for 3 super big ones. Her other works include Heaven Official's Blessing and Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. All 3 of her works are pretty famous in this little circle, and they all have multiple adaptations. Scum Villain itself has a animated show and a comic for those who are interested, but unfortunately, if you are interested in either of those, the animated show only has 1 season. It doesn't even go to the end of the first book, and from what little research I did, the comic didn't span far either. Both of them have been on some sort of mysterious hiatus, and no one knows if they're going to keep going to finish the series in either of those adaptations. This one is also rated 17 plus on the website. I would say it is also rated 17 plus. But the reasons for this one and Scum Villain, they're a little bit different than the ones in The Husky and His White Cat Season. It earns more of that mature rating in language, more adult language, a lot of swear words in here, if that's an issue for you, and a lot of sexual references. I will say, at least in this one, if you are coming from The Husky and His White Cat Season, or if you are familiar with that, this one is different in that the sexual references are at least a little bit more consensual. There are 4 books in total, so it's a fairly short series. I think if you look originally, it's about 100 chapters long. As previously stated, Scum Villain is also a danmei. If you've never heard that word before, I'm going to give you the definition verbatim from the publisher, as in 7Seas Entertainment. I'm going to read it for you here. It says, a Chinese fiction genre focused on romanticized tales of love and attraction between men, similar to BL, Boys Love from Japan. So if you're into that, yeah, great. That's why I'm here. And if you're not into that, there's your warning and you can leave now, but we're happy to have you if you're still here. Moving on to the actual product. So if you've never seen this in person, you've just seen it online, and you want to know what it's actually like, everything from this publisher, 7Seas Entertainment, has very similar quality. So if you know anything about their books, they'll all tend to have the same kind of print and the same font, the same materials used to make it. This one in particular has this is a spot glass cover. It's got flaps on the front and the back, so if you're a fan of flaps, that's what we got here. The print is fairly big, so don't worry about straining your eyes there. And the end of the book has got an index and a glossary with a little pronunciation guide, so in case you don't really understand what's going on, that might help you a little bit. But as with all books from 7Seas Entertainment, there are illustrations in here. Excluding the cover, there are 12 in this particular book. All this information is on the 7Seas Entertainment website. I'm going to put that link in the description below in case you want to check it out yourself and see what other stuff that they offer. Okay, I'm gonna put a little bit of a break in here and put some background info into this. I have a slightly different relationship with the Scum villain self-saving system as I do to the Husky and his White Cat season, and that might affect this review a little bit, so I wanted to explain that a bit. I wanted to give a little bit of a disclaimer in a way, because unlike the other series that I'm reading right now that I'm making summaries for, I have read all of the Scum villain series. However, that was like 3 to 4 years ago, at least 3 to 4 years ago. And at that time, it wasn't the same. The format wasn't the same. The writing wasn't exactly the same. So I have a little bit more hindsight when I'm talking about these ratings. So they might not be true 100% to this book, but I'm trying to keep it as true as I can to this first one. Before I do a review of the whole series. But the reason why I mentioned why it was so different is because back then, 3 to 4 years ago, for those who are reading these types of novels, we didn't have official English translations for a lot of these. Scumville in particular, stuff from MXTX, the same author who did The Husky and His White Cat. Seven Seas Entertainment hadn't picked all that stuff up yet, or they were just barely picking it up. I remember when they were announcing that they were making official translations of these. So when I was first reading them, this was the first novel I had ever read in its entirety. It was entirely off of a fan translation on the internet. So a lot of different pieces were translated by different people and put together just into something that volunteers wanted other people to read. So I've never read it in an official capacity before. So I have no idea if it's really changed anything in the book, but I consider that enough to read it again and put up a summary here. But this also explains a lot of the formatting. So if you've ever looked at these books in the store, or you have a friend that has one, and you might be wondering why the format might be weird in some parts, or why there's so many blanks or breaks in lines, it's because it was a web novel and it was published to be on the web first. In particular with Scum Villain, the original chapters were much shorter. Like I said before, there were about 100 chapters. But if you look in the table of contents of this book, it's split into 4 sections instead of chapters, just combining a lot of chapters into one book. Anyway, we can finally move on to the plot of the Scum Villain self-saving system. So, our main character is Shen Yuan. You won't actually hear him be referred to that very often because he is a transmigrator, but we'll get to that in a second. This man makes it basically his life mission to hate on this book called Proud Immortal Demon Way, which is a poorly written novel with a protagonist named Lu Binghe, who destroys everyone who does him wrong. It's basically a story about revenge and retribution, while he just picks up chicks, like, along the way. But while reading this book, our main character, Shen Yuan, dies and is transported into that book, Proud Immortal Demon Way, as Lu Binghe's abusive teacher, Shen Qingchu, who in the original novel, Proud Immortal Demon Way, died a horrible death as a human stick, is what it's described. So the general plot is that Shen Yuan, now Shen Qingchu, it's him attempting to change his fate while living as a cultivator, because he does not want to die to the protagonist. And honestly, this sounds like a fairly typical transmigration scene. If you don't know what that means, if you're familiar more with anime or like the more Japanese side of things, a transmigrator novel or show is the equivalent of isekai in Japanese, or basically just someone from the real world getting transported into like a fantasy world. It's typically the same, except for the fact that in this novel, there's something called the system. And I think that's what makes it stand out a little bit more from our more typical transmigration novels. So the system is basically like a computer that knows the plot of the story, so it forces the main character to do certain things to ensure the plot will move forward, or else he will get punished. He gets a little bit of wiggle room, but it's nothing like he can just... It's not like he was reborn into the world and can do anything he wants. He's locked into the role of the protagonist's abusive teacher and is struggling to get out of that. I think in terms of classification, I would call this one a romantic comedy in general. However, the romantic part doesn't really come up until maybe like the third or fourth volumes, I'm guessing, because I haven't read those yet, but like kind of in sections. So basically the whole first half is more comedic and awkward, with like affectionate and longing glances passed back and forth. So if you've never read It Dawned Me before and you've been thinking about maybe seeing how it is, this is one that I would recommend for a beginner. One, it's a lot shorter than a lot of other cultivation novels out there. It's only 4 books, and they're not even that long. Like, I don't even think this one, it's not even 300 pages. This is like 290 pages. And these are about, each one of these 4 is about that same amount. This isn't a very long one if you want to get into it and see how it is. The fan translations are still out there though, so that is also an option. It is fairly beginner friendly because it's a transmigration novel, so a lot of the things that happen, even though Shen Yuan is already familiar with the cultivation world and a lot of its like idiosyncrasies or whatever, he explains a lot of that to the audience to try to disprove how bad like the world of Proud Immortal Demon Way was. So it works backwards to the audience as well if you're not very familiar with the whole cultivation fantasy thing. I will put a little bit of a caution sign in this one. This is one of the ones that comes with a lot of hindsight. While this one is classified as a romantic comedy, I would say there is a singular section, like at the end of the series, that I would mark as fairly dubious consent. So if that's something that's a completely no for you, then maybe don't waste your time reading 3 books just to get to the last one and getting to that scene, because it's very important. I won't spoil it because that's like way far ahead, but that's like again in the last like 5%. I will be skipping my typical like favorite line and chapter. I will save that for the full summary, just so that you guys can get through all of this. But in terms of ratings, I will give this an 8 out of 10 on the comedic scale, a 4 out of 10 on the romance, because it's not necessarily romantic. It's more like, again, it's more like longing glances, a lot of hints to what the romance could be. But overall, in terms of the first book, I would give this probably 7 out of 10. But thank you for being here. I hope you liked this little spoiler-free review, and this answered some questions about the Scum villain self-saving system. If you have any more questions about the publisher or anything more specific at the book or who did the illustrations, that will be on the 7 Seas Entertainment website, which again I will link in the description below if you would like that. I plan on doing the summaries for this one as well, and continuing so far with the summaries for the Husky and his white cat. She's in them. I stream every week, occasionally on Twitch. I play Honkai Star Rail, and sometimes I play Stardew Valley. It just depends. So if you want to ask more questions or talk more about these books, or really anything at all, you'll find me all there. I'll put that link in the description below as well. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you all next time.